4 phases of the menstrual cycle: menses, follicular phase, ovulatory phase, luteal phase, in that order. Menses phase is day 1 of period until obviously your period is done. However, the follicular phase also encompasses the time of your period, in that it starts with your hormones are at its lowest level, and around day 3-ish, estrogen starts to rise. Estrogen peaks about 2 days before ovulation, and estrogen peaks to trigger an LH surge. And that LH surge triggers the release of an egg, which is ovulation. So ovulation is 1-day event. It is the main event of the menstrual cycle. And then after ovulation, your hormones start to dip, and that is when you enter the luteal phase. So right after ovulation, the luteal phase starts, which lasts about 2 weeks up until your period starts again. So within these 4 phases, you're getting a variety of fluctuations happening. So I kind of briefly just mentioned during menses phase, during your period, day 1 and 2, your hormones are at its lowest point. Estrogen starts to rise. We also get a peak in testosterone right before ovulation as well. It takes a little dip after ovulation, and then we start to build progesterone. Progesterone is the dominant hormone during the luteal phase. We also get another rise in estrogen, but the main focus is building that progesterone during the second half of your cycle, your luteal phase. And then a few days before your period starts again, your hormones take a dip, and that's what triggers the release of your endometrium lining shedding. So your period. So that's kind of the fluctuations of the menstrual cycle. Now, when we talk about training, I can talk about this forever, but essentially we are because of these hormone fluctuations, they are a woman's superpower, and we can use them to our advantage in terms of training adaptations and recovery. So during the first half of your cycle, day 1 and 2 of your period, you're going to find that most women are a little bit fatigued. They're shedding blood, like their energy levels are a little bit lower. So honor that for whatever they are feeling specifically. Once they get their energy back is a great time to go after it in the weight room, in conditioning, in sprints, in building strength, all of that, because estrogen supports muscle function, muscle recovery, glucose sensitivity, and also makes us more stress resilient. So we can take those stressors of training and adapt from them a lot better during the first half of the cycle than the second half of the cycle. During the second half of the cycle, when we're building progesterone increases our body temperature, our energy needs. It increases insulin resistance, at least at the level of the muscle, because we are putting that's traumatic, but we're putting a lot of effort into building our endometrium lining in the event of a potential pregnancy, whether or not you are trying to get pregnant. So glucose protein is going to building that nice and robust endometrium lining, and not so worried about recovering from exercise at the level of the muscle that we're working at, right? So that is something to consider during the second half of the cycle in terms of recovery, power output, all of that. And on top of that, rate of perceived exertion during the second half of your cycle, especially that week that progesterone's building and peaking, women do experience a higher level rate of perceived exertion. So that's when, you're lifting, you can lift like 300 pounds you can lift like 50 pounds during, the first half of your cycle. That same 50 pounds is going to feel like 300 during the second half of your cycle. At least it can. And it's not because you are decreasing your adaptations. It's not because you're getting weaker, which a lot of women, at least in the general population, experience. And then they just say, this isn't working. No, it's just your body's needs are changing during that time, and that's okay. It's just you just should modify your, training accordingly. So what that looks like is, as I mentioned, going intense, obviously utilizing recovery days between each intensity day, high intensity days. And then during the second half of your cycle, dialing back the intensity. You can still lift. And this is like a common theme that I'm seeing that is driving me bananas from other people talking about like cycle syncing your workouts, who don't necessarily have a training background. But they say like, oh, during your luteal phase, just, walk and do yoga. And it's like, you're not going to adapt from training if you're training one
Right.
week out of the month,
Right.
So just honoring, the individual of where they're at in their menstrual cycle and adjusting and doing like an undulating programming as you would normally do, but just, sync it to their cycle when they are naturally better at adapting during the first half and then a little bit less better at adapting during the second half. So prioritizing recovery and not going for, PRs. And you can, and I will preface this and say like, the woman's body is capable of doing anything at any time, period. Especially competing, because your drive and motivation and adrenaline and all those things will trump all. But when you're dialing in your performance, you can, if you can, you would really support your female clients by honoring these natural hormone fluctuations throughout the month.